I'm Laura Maihofer. I'm excited to have you here for our Ask the Trainer webinar on canine adolescence. This is through Canine Turbo Training. I'm Laura Maihofer, and this webinar is really designed to answer any of your questions about canine adolescence. So there's two ways you can ask your questions. One is with the Zoom webinar chat box, and the other is by raising your hand. We've had a few times where the raise your hand function does not work. So if you raise your hand and you don't hear anything from me, feel free to put in the chat, my hand is up. If I can't unmute you, you can go ahead and ask your questions in the chat box. So this lecture is all about canine adolescence, a really fun and difficult time in our puppies' lives and our lives with our puppies. I'm going to go through a few big topics on adolescence, and there'll be time on each slide for you to ask your questions. Feel free to jump in whenever with your questions because that is my primary goal. Now, at the end, we'll have time for any questions as well, but we're going to go ahead and jump in now. So what is adolescence? This is a period of development that happens somewhere between 6 months and 2 to 3 years. Now it varies by individual as well as by breed and species, but about 6 months to 2 to 3 years is what we see in our dogs. Now during this time we like to call our dogs teenagers because they're going to act a lot like a teenage human might. They've got a lot of hormone changes going on. So you're going to see increases in testosterone in male dogs. You're going to see changes in estrogen and progesterone in female dogs. And that's going to alter a bit how they behave. We also have a big period of brain development that's going on here. So your dog has gone from a really young puppy who's experiencing all the things in the world as new, and they're prepared to accept all these things they see in the world, to a slightly older dog, but not a full mature adult. So their brain regions are going to develop at slightly different rates. And I want to preface this as I am not a neuroscientist. I'm not a neurobiologist. I have done some research on adolescence in dogs and on how their brains develop, but I just want to be clear, I'm not a complete expert in this. So I'm going to give you my understanding. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions on the brain development, but I might refer you to some research. So their brain regions are going to develop at different rates. One of these brain regions is called the limbic system. So this contains their pituitary glands and adrenal glands, as well as other parts. The hippocampus is in that region. And this is going to develop a little bit faster than some of the other regions. So the other region we're going to compare to is the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your dog's brain or a human's brain responsible for thinking and decision making. Now you can see there's a little chart here by McDonald, 2012. This is based on human research. So this is how the brain develops in a human. Now, people who study canines have studied the brain and see that these brain regions are very similar in canines. There has not been a lot of research on how these parts of the brain develop, but the behavior we see in an adolescent dog between 6 months and about 2 or 3 years matches very similar to the behavior we see in adolescent humans during their teenage years. So it has been assumed that the same things are occurring in the dog's brain. The limbic system is developing faster than the prefrontal cortex. So your emotional part of your brain is developing faster than your decision-making, reasoning, and thinking part of the brain. So we end up with individuals who are really prone to quick choices that are the most quick benefits. Animals that are seeking positive feelings right now. And so in humans, this is considered a risky period where we're going to be more prone towards things like addiction, drug use, speeding in your car, things like that teens might do. In our dogs, that's going to look more like risky behaviors like running loose and just going really far and exploring, or grabbing that thing that your human just asked you not to. And we'll talk a bit more about the actual behavior changes we see in adolescent dogs in a future slide. Now, on top of this changes in the brain, developmental rates differing for different parts of the brain, we're also seeing what goes on in the brain is this pruning. So dendritic pruning is what it's called. And this is where the cells that make up the brain are actually being pruned. So parts of the brain that are not used as frequently in the puppy are getting eliminated to make room for other parts of the brain to grow. So for example, if your dog has seen a trash can outside, a dumpster, just a few times and it's never been important to your dog, the memory of that might just get pruned away. That's not an important thing in life, so they're not going to hold on to that. Now, this again is studied in adolescent humans, but we make the jump because of the similarities in the brain structure, that this could be occurring in our dogs. And we see some behavioral changes that match with the idea that there is some pruning of these brain regions. Now, we often refer to this as neural pathways in the brain being pruned. So the cells in the brain align in a certain way. So if you experience a stimulus, you'll have a relatively consistent reaction to that stimulus. You see ice cream, you get happy, and maybe you drool a little bit more. You see a stop sign, you stop. For our dogs, it could be you hear the word sit, you put your butt on the ground. Or you could see things like motor patterns where your dog sees something that looks like prey, a rabbit running, and they stalk and chase and try and grab and catch that so that they can kill it and eat it. Now, not all of our dogs will actually go out and hunt rabbits, but you might see this on a ball. They run and chase and grab it and shake it. That is a neural pathway that's happening. Neural pathways that they haven't used are not going to be kept around as this brain is developing. And one more thing that's really happening in the brain during adolescence is myelination. And myelination has to do with the matter in the brain. So there's something called white matter around some of these cells, the brain cells. And that helps with connectivity of the brain and speed of processing. So greater myelination means faster processing. During adolescence, the cells are being myelinated. We're getting this myelination. So you're starting to see processing occurring at faster rates. And as they reach adulthood, the myelination is more complete. So they're going to be having greater connectivity throughout their brain and faster processing. Whew. So that's a lot of information at a very base level about the dog's neurobiology during adolescence. I really welcome any questions you have on this, and I'll answer the best I can. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because it relates to the behavioral changes we see in our adolescents. They are not just stubborn, they're actually having brain changes that cause them to act on their impulses. And when we talk about this connectivity, a lot of the research I dug into on adolescence shows that the connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system is not strong at this age. So even as the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex are developing, they might not be communicating with each other because we don't have all of the myelin sheaths in their neural cells. The myelination is not yet complete. So, any questions you have on this physiological changes in adolescence? please let me know. But we're going to move on to talk about puberty because I mentioned there are hormone changes going on. This has to do with your dogs going through puberty, just like a human would go through. And puberty is the sexual maturation. So it's seen in dogs around 6 to 9 months. And again, it depends on your breed, it depends on your individual. We tend to see it occur a little later in our giant breeds. So if you've got a Mastiff or a Malamute around your house, bigger dogs, they're gonna go through puberty a little bit on the later end of that, maybe 9 months, maybe 10. And since it varies in individual, your dog might go through puberty at 5 months. It really could depend, but 6 to 9 months is our average. Now, social maturity tends to occur around 12 to 36 months. So all the way from a year to 3 years. So our sexual maturity comes before our social maturity. So in adolescence, you have a dog with all of these raging hormones without social maturity. That thinking part of the brain is not fully developed. But we do have all these hormones raging through their system. Now, research shows that female dogs tend to have their first heat somewhere between 6 months and 16 months of age. And in that time, they can get pregnant. So our young adolescent puppy who's having their first heat is fertile. So it is important that if you have a female dog who's in their first heat, that we do keep them separated from any intact males to avoid that risk of pregnancy. Otherwise, we might end up with an unexpected litter, which is both expensive and a lot of work. Now, males can be fertile as young as 5 months of age. And during this time, they're getting a big boost of testosterone. And some of the studies I read actually said that the testosterone in male puppies during adolescence is actually higher than it can be in the fully mature adult male. And this can have some effects on how they are both treated and how they behave. So we sometimes see, according to the research, and I have seen this firsthand in dog daycares, male puppies who are going through puberty will have certain smells that they're giving off, and some dogs will react negatively towards those. So you might end up with a dog who's giving off this smell of testosterone, and other dogs are picking fights with him. It can be due to these hormone changes in that individual. Now, during this time, we will see some behaviors like humping and mounting occur. Sometimes we're seeing this as a sexual behavior, but we will also see humping under stress conditions. So if you have a dog who's starting to show humping behaviors or mounting behaviors, and this doesn't only occur in males, this can occur in females as well. We want to look at the context in which it occurs to figure out the source of that behavior. If it only happens when they're in a large group of dogs and everybody's running around and it's really exciting, it could be a coping mechanism for them. If it only happens towards that stranger that comes into your house, it could be a little anxiety about the stranger in the house. And humping makes them feel a little bit better. So we'll see it under those situations. But if it happens when this one particular female comes around and it's accompanied by ear licking, ear licking is one that we tend to see when we have this more sexual behavior, or they might kind of peck at them with their nose or put their chin over and then hop their whole body on. You could be seeing kind of a flirty sexual behavior coming out due to the hormone changes in your adolescent dog. Some other male-specific behaviors we see during male canine puberty is urine marking and roaming. So around this age, we start to see them peeing on things, little bits of pee on all sorts of things. And we'll see them wander further. So roaming really means the dog is going to travel and they're in search of a mate. So in a wild animal, this would be the age that they go out to find a mate and form their new family. Here we have dogs that are going to stay with us for life, but their natural instinct is going to be to roam. Now, urine marking and roaming are two things that research has showed us can be reduced with neutering. So those were two big behavioral changes we saw with neutering. One quick little caveat on this page as we're talking about puberty and heats and fertility. Spaying and neutering is something that is highly recommended by rescues and vets. There is a lot of change in the research right now talking about times at which we should spay or neuter. There are benefits and risks to keeping a dog intact longer or spaying or neutering earlier. But the question of when to spay or neuter is best answered by a vet. So if you're wondering, should I have my male dog who's 7 months old neutered right now? Unfortunately, I don't have a good response for you. I have some information from the research, but your vet is going to be the one to really tell you if it's the best time for that. So you can enter into the chat box or you can raise your hand if you have any questions on puberty. This is kind of an interesting one. And I know that there's a lot of changes that go on in our dogs because of these hormone changes, as well as adolescent humans. These hormone changes, as well as the brain changes we discussed, result in changes in behavior. Now, this is where I understand a lot more because I am a trainer. I am all about the behavior. So here I have a lot more to give you. Now, teenagers, our adolescent dogs are impulsive individuals because, again, they want it now. They want to feel that pleasure now, that good thing. They want it fast. So we'll see a lot of impulsivity from our teen dogs. They're independent and they're exploring. Those roaming behaviors come across as ignoring our recalls, wandering much further than our young puppy wandered. So I get a lot of clients who have young dogs who stick really close. Now, I let my puppy off leash and they stayed within 10 feet of me. Your adolescent dog might not stay within 10 feet of you, even if your 12-week-old puppy did. So this is a time where I really, really, really highly recommend leashes, even if you're out in a remote area. Unless they're in a fenced space, a leash is going to be the best tool to keep your adolescent dog safe because their instincts might tell them to roam far. Now, we also see a decreased response to previously learned cues. So our adolescent dogs may have learned how to sit and stay when they were a young puppy. But when we ask them to do this, as they get a little bit older, some of them are going to look at us with a blank stare. What? They actually cannot remember what that means because of some of this brain pruning. And because there are other things now that are a stronger impulse for them. So it is very, very common for an adolescent dog to ignore what we ask them to do, not necessarily because they are purposefully or intentionally ignoring us, but they actually don't know what we're asking them anymore. So if you have a dog who, as a young puppy, was super, super responsive to your cues, they listened right away, and now as an adolescent, they aren't responding like that, don't immediately jump to the fact that they could be stubborn. We want to actually consider that they might not know what we mean anymore. So in an adolescent individual with a previously learned cue, I will go back and reteach them because a lot of them no longer are holding that information that we gave them. This is actually what I think about a lot trying to learn Spanish as I was growing up. I took Spanish classes when I was young, and I learned quite a bit. And then in high school, I took beginner Spanish classes, and I relearned a lot of what I had learned before, but I didn't remember any of it. Same thing happens for our dogs. Now, at this time, we're also seeing increases in energy levels. So your dog's growth rate is physical growth rate. The length of their legs, the length of their torso and tail and head is going to be slowing a little bit. We have a really fast physical growth rate until about 6 to 8 months, and then it starts to taper off a little bit. They're still growing, but not quite at the same rate. And so they have a lot more energy for other things. Our really young puppies sleep a lot because they've got baby teeth that they're pushing out to grow new adult teeth. They've got long limbs that they're trying to grow. And now we have this kind of gawky teenage dog who's almost as tall as they're going to get and full of energy. It's very normal for our adolescent dogs to be bouncing off the walls. And unfortunately, this is the time where we tend to see fear, reactivity, and aggression develop in dogs who we are going to see this develop in. It is much more rare to see fear, reactivity, and aggression, or specifically reactivity and aggression in a younger puppy. It's very rare to see fear in a young puppy under 14 weeks of age. It happens and we can help them through it. But adolescence is when we tend to see a lot of these fears creep up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Now, if you have any questions on the behavioral changes you're seeing in your adolescent dog or you've seen in previous adolescent dogs, or these points we've gone over, feel free to type them into the chat box or press the raise hand button. And in the absence of questions, I'm going to keep pushing through. But please feel free to cut me off at any point. All right. Oh, I see there is a question. So Liz, I'm going to hit the allow you to talk. Hi, Liz.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. What is your question?
So my dog I think he's kind of going through that fear stage. Like he barks at the dog next door who's like perfectly well behaved. Like all the dog is doing is sitting down by the fence and he goes crazy. He like will bark for like an hour afterwards. I mean, like I'll bring him inside. He won't stop barking.
Yeah. How old is your dog?
He's about 7 months.
7 months. Yeah. It is very possible we're seeing that fear kind of develop into reactivity. The other thing we might be seeing is frustration. So how did he previously respond to the other dog next door?
The dog is new.
Ah, okay. The dog's brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So brand new things can absolutely be scary to our adolescent dogs. Fear of new things is the top of the list here when you see my fear, reactivity, and aggression bullets. Because as our dogs get older, their brains are developed to expect to see the same things they've seen since puppyhood. So the puppy's brain is developing, experiencing the world, and expecting that the future world is going to be the same. So the new things do tend to be kind of scary to our adolescents. Now, the other thing you mentioned was that there is a fence between them. And we will sometimes see in adolescents frustration be expressed as reactivity, barking, lunging. You might see them run up and down the fence. Now, the best thing we can do for our adolescent dogs who are showing fear or frustration-based reactivity is to help them get distance when possible. But I do understand, Liz, it's tricky when it's your backyard. But we also want to change their emotional response to seeing that, what we call trigger. So here for your dog, 7 months old, neighbor dog across from a fence. Is it a chain link fence or is it a privacy fence?
Chain link fence.
Okay, chain link fence. There's a few things we could do. So you could set up some management so your dog isn't seeing them as intensely. So there are fence screens you can purchase. They look kind of like big construction sheets that you might see over a fence around a construction site. There are also fence slats that you can get that are like plastic slats that slide between the chain link fence. And that would reduce the intensity of that trigger to your dog because they're not going to see them outside each time. And you could put that up just on the side of the fence where the other dog is, or if there's other things your dog barks at through the fence, you could put it up everywhere. We find that blocking the visual tends to reduce some of the fear or frustration because we have one less thing that the dog is experiencing that's causing them to feel those feelings. But your dog will still hear the dog on the other side of the fence. And on that fence screen, they might still see that dog's shadow. So that won't totally get rid of this experience for your dog. What I often recommend is having your dog outside on leash with you so that you're able to control some of the distance and so that we don't have the risk of maybe a bite happening through the fence if our dogs get so upset that they start to bite. And I would start to set it up so anytime that neighbor dog is out, something really good is happening for your dog in the backyard. So the existence of the neighbor dog being outside predicts great things for your dogs. I do treats that I scatter on the ground for them. It's a game we like to call Find It, where I'll say find it, and then I throw tasty treats all over the ground for them to sniff out and find. I'll play their favorite games outside. So if your dog likes Frisbee or they like fetch, I pair the other dog being out with the opportunity to play Frisbee or fetch. And I'll set it up so that if the dog is out and your dog is right there in front of the fence near them, I want to build up a really strong recall behavior. And recall is really hard for adolescents. So I'm going to make it super easy for the dog who's, one, distressed, whether they're fearful or frustrated, and two, going through this adolescent period. So I'll usually have them on leash. It's an emergency measure in case we start to see aggression. But when I'm first starting my recall away from another dog on the other side of the fence, I'll put a tasty treat right in front of the dog's nose and guide them away with that treat. So it's super easy for them. There's a high value piece of food right in front of their nose, helping them turn. I want the dog to take a few steps away from that other dog before I give them the food. And I'll give them a word that tells them that they've earned it then. So I'll usually say, yes. Or if you've ever used a clicker before, you can use a clicker in this training. Clicking the moment your dog starts to move away from the other dog and then feeding them those tasty treats. When I can, if we're not planning on training, so if you're going to say take your dog out just to go potty, I will typically look out the door first to see if the neighbor dog is out. Trying to set it up so that if the neighbor dog is out, I'm prepared to train, prepared with those treats, prepared with the toys. And if the neighbor dog is not out, we go out for a quick potty. There's not going to be a ton of food getting thrown on the ground during that time because I want to save that high value food for when they're experiencing the neighbor dog in the yard next door. And then if the neighbor dog comes out while we're out there, I do want to make sure that there's some food available. So I like to keep, if possible, a container of treats outside, non-perishable, usually in a glass jar, or if you have like a cooler outside or right inside the door, we can grab a bag of treats that we carry out with us at all times. So if we have that experience of the neighbor dog, we can start to change their mind about what that means. Now, one little tip and caveat to this, if your dog starts barking immediately when they see them, the good news is you can still give them treats and you can still play with them and tell them they're good, because that barking is usually coming from an emotional place. So this heightened limbic response, they're frustrated or they're fearful. And so when they're barking because of that, it's actually just a symptom of the emotion. And you can feed them tons of treats. And it's actually a very low likelihood that we would reinforce that barking. Now it can happen, but the barking tends to change. So it's no longer this really intense emotional barking, whoa, 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 whoa. And it sort of changes into more operant barking. So we might get bark, bark, and then they look up at you, did I get my treat? And that kind of barking is a lot easier to replace with a different behavior. So that was a lot. What questions do you have on what I just said?
No, I think that helped. I don't know if I have any more questions right now, just some ideas to think over.
Okay, yeah, if you come up with anything more, just let me know. You can raise your hand or you can enter it into the chat box.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely, thanks for coming. All right, so as we're thinking about fear and reactivity and aggression, I mentioned that fear of new things tends to develop around this age. And now this is really adaptive for the individual, because if you think about a wild animal, let's take a wolf, because they're dogs' close ancestors and relatives evolutionarily. A young wolf is going to be in the den with their parents. They're going to be safe, but they're going to be wandering a little bit out of the den, maybe 20 feet or so, within range where they can see the den and get to safety easily. And they're experiencing things in their environment. Their brain is there, ready to absorb all the things they see, and it's teaching them about what life is going to be like. Now, as they reach this teenage phase or adolescence, their hormones are changing, and it's driving them to go seek out a mate. So they're going to wander further from the den. And in this time, if they see anything brand new, let's say they see a human for the first time, it is going to be adaptive for them to be fearful of that new thing, of that person in this scenario, because anything new could be dangerous. If you err on the side of new is scary, you're more likely to move away, flee from it if you can. You're going to live to see another day. If, as an adolescent, and you go out and you see all these new things, your brain is not erring on the side of new is scary, you could walk right up to a hunter. And so this kind of fear is really natural and is actually designed to help an animal survive adolescence and get through to adulthood. It's sometimes described as a second fear period because we see times during puppyhood where fear is heightened. But what we found is that this is not just a phase that's going to end on its own. Unless we treat it as a true fear and help the dog overcome it, they can keep these fears through adulthood. So when we just talked about how to help Liz's dog get more comfortable with the neighbor dog, that's going to set them up to be more comfortable throughout their life. If we just ignore the fear, they tend to hold on to it. Oh, yes, my imitation of barking is a lot like a teenage dog that's all wound up. Yeah, I've heard a lot of them make that same kind of bark. The bark that I demoed there is sort of like our alert bark. There's a big scary thing and I need it to go away. That boo, 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 boo. It's fast and it changes a lot if you can change the emotion behind it. So my dog used to do that when strangers came into the house. Woo, 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 woo. And I would feed her treats to change her emotional response there. It changed from woo, 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 woo to whoa, 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 and then she looks at me and smiles. And I actually love that. I don't mind if my dog barks a couple of times when somebody comes in my house because I want to know there's somebody in my house, as long as her emotions aren't so heightened, so she can still think in those moments. All right. Now, we'll also sometimes see a new fear of something they've seen previously. So I gave a little I gave an example of dogs who become fearful of the dumpster outside. This is one that I often hear. If you have a bin with trash in it that you put out only once a week, your dog has maybe only seen that a few times when you walk by it. And it probably didn't have a lot of meaning to your young puppy. So your adolescent dog going out, having this brain pruning that's taking place, neural pathway pruning, they might not remember that trash can. And so for them, this is a new thing. And it is adaptive to be fearful of new things. So we get our adolescent dogs barking at things like the dumpster outside, or a traffic cone, or a plastic bag that blows in the wind. I'm going to treat all of these fears similarly. I'm going to treat them like a true fear. The dog is scared, so I want to help them overcome that. And when we see a dog who's scared, we want to help them get distance. So if you're afraid of that traffic cone, I'm going to encourage you to take a few steps away from the traffic cone so that the dog learns flight is the best option when you're scared. And then I want to pair seeing the scary thing with something really good. So as long as you see that dumpster, or as long as you see that plastic bag blowing in the wind, there's tasty treats available to you. There's a nice game of tug with this toy that I brought with me, especially for our dogs who maybe are not as motivated by food. They can take it or leave it even when they're in the house. I want to bring their favorite things with me and set it up so seeing that kind of scary thing predicts really good things for them. Food is our #1 tool when we're dealing with fear because our goal is always to get a dog who's happy and calm. When we use toys to overcome fear, we can build a really happy feeling, but we've also got arousal in there. So if your dog does like food, I want to use that. But we're going to have to use it at a distance where the dog is comfortable enough. So we can't go right up to that trash can or cone or plastic bag and try and feed treats there where our dog is showing the fear, is barking, is growling, is shaking. We want to back them up a little bit. Let's go 10 feet back here and observe it from a distance where you can think so that their brain is able to make the connection. That thing predicts good things for me. Now, you might have a dog who as a puppy showed some fear. Most puppies' fear is going to be displayed in a smaller way. So they might hide behind your legs, or they might lower their body, making themselves small, or they might run away. But as our young puppies reach adolescence, we sometimes see that fear displayed as aggression or reactivity for the first time. So your puppy who used to hide behind your legs now barks when they see a stranger, or lunges, or you might see the first bite. And we really want to avoid that as much as possible by setting it up so any fears we see, we start to change the emotional response right away. So as soon as I see fear in a young dog, I want to set it up so that scary thing predicts good things for you. But if we're starting to see reactivity develop or aggression develop, this is a good time to start treating it, because reactivity and aggression tends to grow until your dog reaches social maturity, which again is not until 1 to 2 or 3 years even. So if I'm seeing that barking in the teenage dog, I start working with them right away. If you see that, it's a good time to reach out for a trainer, especially if there's any aggression. You can find certified professional trainers through the CPDT website, or if you look at the APDT website. So these are professional organizations who certify dog trainers. I am a certified professional dog trainer and certified behavioral consultant. Working with a trainer who understands reactivity and aggression is very important. And there are some ways to do this at a relatively low cost, such as through video consultations, but it is good to have a professional on board if we are seeing aggression. You might see aggression at the vet for the first time during this age. And if that's the case, there's a lot that can be done. So again, reaching out if you're seeing aggression in your adolescent, it's a good time to start working towards changing their emotional response to these things. And I mentioned frustration can develop into reactivity as well. So if you had a young puppy who every time they saw a person, they really wanted to get over there and they're pulling and pulling and they want to go greet and they want to go greet another dog, and now they're starting to bark when they see them, even though when they're off leash, they're super happy with other dogs and super happy to run up and meet all the people, your dog might be displaying frustration through reactivity. Now, frustration through reactivity can get a dog in trouble because the other dog on the other end of the leash might not be so clear that that barking is because your dog is friendly, and your dog if they're frustrated every time they see another dog or person, can actually start to feel bad about seeing dogs and people. So we can see a dog who previously loved going up and seeing everybody start to actually bite or show aggression when that person comes close, because for them, each person they see predicts this unhappy feeling. So again, if we're starting to see reactivity develop, we want to start treating it like it is going to be there for life so that we can mitigate the growth of that behavior. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in sections on management and training. Now, there's also some evidence that there is development of territoriality and resource guarding during this time. So if you think about an individual who's reaching sexual maturity, they're going to be less likely to be comfortable with another individual of the same sex in their territory, because that is now competition. And we'll often see things like resource guarding of food or toys start to grow during this time, because again, our young puppies are going to be quieter about their emotions. They're smaller, they've got smaller teeth. They can't say, nope, this is mine, quite as much as an older dog can. So you might have noticed your younger puppy getting a little bit stiff when we approach when they have food. Now they might bark or growl. This is a form of a fear. So territoriality and resource guarding, very similar concepts, territoriality being the resource guarding of their location, of their homeland. That is a fear that they're going to lose their resources. So we will treat it very similar to a fear. But if you're dealing with aggression over resource guarding, again, it's important to work with a certified professional so that we don't risk increasing that aggression. Any more questions on fear, reactivity, or aggression? Again, feel free to jump in anytime if you come up with questions as we go. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about managing adolescence. So we talked about all these different behavior changes. You have an impulsive dog who's roaming further, who might be showing reactivity now. Your dog might not be showing any reactivity, fear, or aggression, but they might have started jumping up on the counter and stealing your food. Or they might have started digging through the trash can like they never did before. Or you might just have this intensity of chewing that you didn't have before, because before your young puppy had smaller teeth, and now they have bigger teeth that do more damage. Our adolescent dogs actually can still be teething even at this age. So even as their adult teeth come in, they can be teething all the way through 8 or 9 months, because those adult teeth are not fully set in the gums. There's still pain there that they're relieving through chewing. So there's a lot we can do to help manage this kind of difficult period of time in our lives with our dogs. Importantly, we want to continue to keep items we don't want our dog to chew up or play with out of range. This is a time where I tend to secure trash cans. So putting trash cans in cupboards and closing those cupboards with baby locks, getting trash cans with lids on them so your dog's not going into the bathroom trash. I've seen people actually take crates and put the crate on its side and put the trash can inside the dog crate so that the dog just doesn't have access to that trash can. Keeping shoes out of range, so you're not always fighting with your dog about getting your shoes back. Having shoes in the closet or up high where your dog can't reach. Same thing goes for laundry, socks. I have friends who have an adolescent dog and they have a laundry closet. So when they have their dirty clothes, they throw them in the bin inside the closet, and they have a sign, keep the closet door closed. Otherwise, their puppy's gonna run off with a sock. Keeping those things out of range sets it up so that we don't have as much chasing our dog down to get these items away. The last thing we wanna do is chase our adolescent around the house when they have a sock in their mouth, because that's a really fun game for a teen. Now, we also want to keep the counters clean or unavailable. And I say this because I have a dog who likes to steal food off the counters, and I don't find it realistic for myself to not have things on the counters. I have paper towel up there all the time. I tend to have a dirty plate on the counter. And so I have a gate that can go across the kitchen. And because my kitchen doorway is wider than a standard gate can hold, it is a foldable exercise pen style gate, so that my dog can't access those countertops when I'm not there. Now, these management tips, this is actually enough if you want to. If you're comfortable having that gate in the doorway, only having your dog in the kitchen when you're there, or having that trash can sealed away, you don't actually have to teach your dog not to go in there. If the management is in place so the dog is not practicing, we have solved the problem. But there's also a lot of tips I'll give you on training these adolescent behaviors as well, because we can teach our dogs to leave those things on the counter alone. We can teach our dogs not to dig through the trash. It simply requires a bit of work. So if you are living a very busy life and you have an adolescent dog, and you're staying on top of their exercise and you're giving them lots of outlets, like we'll talk about in the next slide, management can be a really good solution for these household items that we want our dogs to avoid. Now, we also want to utilize our gates, crates, and exercise pens. So just because your dog looks like an adult does not mean they're going to behave like an adult. And if you're leaving the house for an extended period of time, it can help to shut off certain rooms, have gates in places so your dog's not going to have access to different areas, or even have your dog in the crate during those times, as long as your dog is not having severe separation anxiety or trying to escape the crate. Now, we also can set up management for reactivity. So if your dog barks and lunges now when they see dogs or people on walks, we avoid going on walks at times where we're going to see a lot of dogs or people, or in places that are really busy. With our dogs that show reactivity, a neighborhood walk where we go around and we see a bunch of people and a bunch of dogs, it's not actually enjoyable necessarily if they're getting really ramped up the whole time. If they're barking and lunging a lot, they are feeling frustration or fear. And so it can help to go out instead to a quiet park where we can wander around and sniff without seeing as many triggers. Or to exercise a bit more in the backyard and go on a shorter walk where we see fewer people and dogs. And it can be important to have 2 points of contact, especially on our larger dogs or any of our dogs who might lunge while they're walking. So 2 points of contact means we have 2 leashes, one of which I love to be a waist leash. I put the leash around my waist, attach that to the dog's collar or harness, and then I have a handheld leash attached to another point on the harness, or the harness instead of the collar. And so I'm holding one leash with my hands, and my other leash is my backup. If the dog lunges and pulls the leash out of my hands, they're still attached around my waist, which is also a very strong point for balance. So if you have a very strong dog, holding up here, they might pull you over. Getting pulled by your waist, you're less likely to fall down. So these 2 points of management are really essential if we're walking a reactive dog. And you can actually see those on our sweet boy here. You see these 2 different points of contact, one to the collar and one to the harness. I love him. Now, I mentioned it's really important to meet those physical needs as well as our dog's need for mental exercise. Our adolescent dog's brain is growing, it's developing, and they have a lot of extra energy. So it's really good to give them physical exercise. Running around the backyard, going out on walks, recall back and forth between 2 people in the basement on cold days or on rainy days. As we're playing and working with our adolescent dogs to get them their physical exercise, we do want to be careful though, because they are not fully physically mature yet. The dog's growth plates don't fuse until about 12 to 16 months of age. And during that time, we can damage their bodies if we're running them really hard or if we're doing really big or high impact jumps. So we try and set it up so that our running is shorter than our walking, so you can do interval work with your teenager. We don't want to do really high intensity running. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
Hi, what question do you have?
So I live in the city, and there are dogs and people everywhere. Like, it's not like the city, like with a bunch of skyscrapers or anything, but, and I have a corner lot, and there's really nowhere for me to play in the yard or walk or anything. As soon as I walk out, if there's a person walking by, my 8-month-old barks. We walk past a house, and there's anybody in the yard, she barks. She doesn't necessarily bark at other dogs, but every block that I go by, there's dogs that do bark at her, and she doesn't really express fear, but I don't know if it's learned that she feels that she needs to bark at people when she sees people.
Oh.
So, and like I have a big bay window, and she looks out the window, there's people walking by, she barks.
Okay, yeah.
This is something that's developed probably the past couple months, because before she didn't really notice that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does have a lot to do with her age now. We tend to see a lot more vocal behavior as they get older. So the first thing I'm thinking about is that big bay window. So one of my favorite things, and I'm not sure if you can see my screen right now. I am going to go ahead and disable your talking just so you can see my screen, but I'll re-enable it in just a little bit. So let me see if I can. Okay, so this is window film. This is a roll of it, but this is actually just a plastic film. It's non-adhesive, and you can put it up on your windows up to dog height. So I'm going to go ahead and make it so that you can talk again, Ben. But this window film is one of my favorite things for barking out windows because it's going to let the light in, but block the dog's view of all those passing people. So this is one of my big management tips when we have barking that's going on from something that the dog sees from inside the house. Now, every time your dog sees a person that's triggering that barking response, they're going to have a little more stress in their system. This is actually a physiological response. So stress hormones are released in the body. So the more we can reduce their experience of those triggers, the number of people she sees walking by each day, the less likely it is she's going to be barking at the next person she sees. Not that it's going to fix things or solve things immediately, but this is a good management step while we work on training. So the window film is a big suggestion. I love this one. It helps a lot of dogs. And again, I just put it up to dog height, and it can actually be quite beautiful. It looks like frosted windows. Now that's just one tip, but you're in a really busy area and you're on a corner lot. So we know that going outside, we're going to see people on all sides. I think about timing my walks when things are a little bit quieter. So if I can, I'll go out really early in the morning or later at night when fewer people are out. My favorite time actually to walk is in the middle of the day on Monday and Tuesday, because I am lucky enough that those are my days off. So my dog and I go walking while everybody else is at work. If you have a car, is she comfortable in the car?
Yeah, she loves the car.
Okay, cool. If she loves the car, you might consider taking your walks somewhere else. So going out to a park, driving a little ways out of the city so we're in a quieter neighborhood. And it's okay if she's not getting a walk every day, but if we're setting it up so that she gets 3 or 4 little adventures, that's what I aim for, 4 adventures a week. Sometimes it's only 3. And then we can get some exercise in the house. So there's a lot of different games you can play with your dog for both physical and mental exercise in the household. One of them is stairs. So if you have any stairs in your house, you can have one person stand at the bottom of the stairs and one person stand at the top, and we recall up and down those stairs. Now with an adolescent, we don't want to go too hard or do too much of that. So I might just do a couple minutes and then work on something that requires a little bit more brain work. Sniffing games tends to help tire dogs out. So you can play a game called the shell game, where you have a few different shells. This could be Tupperware that you drill a little hole in. The idea is they're opaque containers that you have a little hole so scent can get out. and I hide a treat under one of them, and the dog's job is to figure out which one has the treat under it. So it's a nose work game that's going to work their brain mentally. And mental exercise is actually similar to physical exercise. It can help tire our adolescent dogs out. And so you can also play other games. For physical work, you can do what's called puppy push-ups, where we have our dog sit and then lay down and then stand up and get a treat for that series of behaviors. But again, I'm going to keep in mind, this is a lot like a push-up for a human. Even though it's not cardio, it's physical work. So I don't do more than 5 or 10 in a row. I want to make sure that the dog's got the muscles there to support their body doing these moves. And then the last thing I'm thinking about with your girl is potty breaks, because we are going to need to go outside to go potty. In your area, I look for a place where I'm going to see fewer people. So if there's a side of the house, or if there's an alcove between two buildings where we can go and we're going to be less likely to see a bunch of people going by, that's going to be my regular potty area. Now, if you're in a house and you have a yard, you could set up a visual barrier for bathroom breaks, so that, again, we're not seeing every person that walks by when we're just going out to go to the bathroom. Now, I'd also recommend having treats on hand when you do go out and setting it up so each person she sees predicts a treat. So that's going to actually be the work to change how she feels about each person she sees. Because like you said, right now, people predict barking. Whether that's fear or frustration, we might not know. But changing what people mean to her, people now mean there's going to be a tasty treat right here by my body, help set her up for success so that she starts to change her thought process on people. We don't necessarily have to even have the dog do a behavior. In fact, when a dog is barking towards something, I typically am not going to ask them to do anything until I'm sure that they're comfortable and happy. So if we have a dog alert barking whenever they see a person, I'm going to start by just feeding them treats right away. What we see over time is the dog tends to see those people and predict that they're going to get food. So we get a dog who starts to point out people to us. Hey, there's a person. Where's my treat?
I have noticed sometimes when she barks, she comes looking for me and she's wagging her tail. You know, it's kind of like, hey, there's somebody out there, and, you know, here you go.
Good. Yeah, she's probably alerting you to these people out here. So as we start to see this behavior of, hey, there's a person over there. Hey, Dad, look, there's a person over there. I start to set it up so that the dog recognizes that I see the person. So as the dog looks out and see a person, I try and get ahead of them when I can. So she sees a person and I've seen them too. I'll say, hey, look, a person, and then I'll feed her a treat. Or if you have a clicker, you can use that clicker to tell her the person predicted a treat for you. So we watch the dog's head, and when the dog's head orients towards a person, we click and then offer a treat towards our body. So she starts to learn seeing a person predicts food towards your body. This is a game called Engage and Disengage. And the dog will start to skip ahead. So we're getting ahead of the bark. So she learns you don't have to bark in this. All you have to do is see the person. And eventually we get a dog who sees the person and then just looks up to us quietly. So we're changing it from bark, 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 and find Dad to see the person and look towards Dad. And in that way, we can start to get this quieter response and a calmer response. Less of that intense emotionality behind it. Now, I keep in mind that the closer the person is, the more intense the emotion is going to be. So even as we're playing this game with people we see down the block, it doesn't mean our dog is going to not bark at a person who's 10 feet away. So I really want to pay attention to her comfort level with their distance from her as well. And I look at all of the body language of the dog to determine the emotions. So we have a webinar called Canine Body Language that you can find on our YouTube channel. That is, I believe, an hour and 40 minutes just on reading dog body language. It is its own language, so there's a lot on it. And I think that would be a really good one to look at as we're kind of teasing apart, how does our dog feel? A wagging tail tells me that she's aroused, so she's excited. It doesn't necessarily mean that she's happy though. So I look at the way the tail is wagging. Based on the midpoint where it typically is, her neutral position, is it really high up? Is it lower down? Or is it about neutral? Does it wag really fast? Or does it wag kind of slowly and floppily? All of that is going to give me an idea of how the dog is feeling. And I'd recommend checking out that body language webinar for anybody who hasn't. It's really good. I actually like to watch it like once a month, just because it's one of my favorite things. I hope that helps. Do you have any more questions on that?
Oh, I think that's a good start. Actually, my trainer that recommended this told me about the window film, so I got 2 recommendations for him, so I should probably do it.
Awesome. Yes. Window film is fantastic. It is like my favorite thing. I think if there was one thing I could get everybody to do, it would be to put up window film on your windows if your dog barks out them. It brings so much peace to the household. I'm living out kind of in the country now, but I used to live right in like downtown suburbia Ann Arbor, and there were a lot of dogs and people who walked by every day. And I had window film ready when I brought my dog home. I had already purchased it, but I hadn't put it up on my windows yet. And I was like, oh, I'll put it up if I need to. And it was maybe 2 weeks into being in my home that my dog saw the first dog out that window. And she jumped up onto the windowsill and knocked over half my plants. And she jumped over the couch onto the middle of the room. And she did this screaming owl cry. And then she body slammed the front door. And my goodness, I put that window film up that night. So I really highly recommend it.
Okay, perfect.
All right, if you come up with any questions, other questions, let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and switch you out of the talking position for now, but thanks again for asking your question.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, I should mention Tug is another really fun game that we can play in the house. There is a lot of misinformation about Tug out there. So a lot of people will tell you that tugging with your dog might make them more aggressive. As it turns out, Tug just makes them really aroused. So it's really exciting. And we'll sometimes get dogs who go arr, 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 while they're playing Tug. That is not necessarily aggression. What it is a lot of excitement. So I like to play Tug with some rules. So few of my rules are, you grab the toy when I say, get it. So I'll say, get it, and I make the toy exciting by moving backwards or wiggling it around, and the dog grabs it then. We play Tug for a little while, and more often than not, I want the dog to win. So I let the dog win so that they feel really successful, they enjoy it, and they want to come back for more. And you'll see if you let the dog win more often than not, they come back and they shove it back into your hands. Let's play more. And I'll play more with them. But I also want my adolescent dog to learn that humans are not super, super strong. So I like to say I have these weak, noodly arms. And as I'm playing Tug with the dog, if they give it a good pull, I let go so they win, so that they learn not to play as strong as they possibly can. But Tug is a really nice game to help get some of that energy out, because it is a big physical workout for our dogs. It can be a physical workout for us too. Now, I mentioned here in these slides to teach arousal control. With Tug, if the dog is getting really amped up, they're starting to go ah, rah, rah, a lot, I'm going to lower the intensity of my tugging. So if I'm tugging real hard, I'm going to amp the dog up. But I'll make it a little bit looser, a little more relaxed to help bring some of that arousal down. I also like to insert some operant behaviors or obedience training into my games of Tug or Fetch. So when I do get the toy, or when I'm playing Fetch and I pick up the toy, I'll ask the dog to sit, or I'll ask them to lay down between repetitions of throwing the toy. So they're learning how to go from real excited to a little bit calmer, to excited again, to calmer. And now I'm also mentioning in here this inverted pyramid of activity. So this is something I actually learned about in a vet conference that we went to just a few weeks ago. One of the veterinarians, I'm sorry, I cannot remember who at the top of my head, described this inverted pyramid of activity for dogs with high arousal. And I think this is fantastic for our adolescent dogs. So the inverted pyramid of activity starts at the top with exercise, high level exercise, running together, tugging together, playing fetch, something that is a lot of activity. And then the next level down is going to be a calmer kind of game with the human. So maybe this is petting or recall. And then we move to something that's a little bit more thought-provoking, such as training, where we're going to get that prefrontal cortex working. You're thinking a little bit more. And then we go down to a puzzle toy or an enrichment item that you work on your own. So your Kongs, your snuffle mats, puzzle toys that your dog has to figure out how to flip the flap up to find the treat, a licky mat that they can lick the peanut butter that you frozen it off of. And then finally, we get down to reinforcing calm behaviors. So treats for just laying down and relaxing. And so this inverted pyramid of activity is a really nice way to help a dog who's got high arousal, who doesn't know how to just lay down on their own. A lot of time what we do is we play fetch with our dog for a while, and then we sit down to relax, to read a book or watch TV or maybe get some work done. And our dog is over here, we've been playing, I need something to do still, and they're asking us to play, and they're asking us to play, and it can feel annoying because we are at a point where we want to relax, and our dog is at a point where they cannot relax. So this inverted pyramid of arousal and activity, going from exercise to playing and training to some calm activity with the person like petting to a puzzle toy to getting reinforced for calm behavior, helps bring the arousal down, especially in individuals who have a hard time modulating it themselves. Adolescents are individuals who have a hard time modulating their arousal. It can be harder for our dogs who are 6 months to 2 years to settle down after something that's brought their energy up. So this is something that I think is a really powerful tool that we can use, especially with these teen dogs who are struggling with it on their own. Feel free to ask any questions you have about physical and mental exercise. I'll send in the follow-up some information on different games you can play with your dog outside of going on a walk in the neighborhood that can help burn energy and work mental exercises. It is really good to have both mental exercise and physical exercise, and to alternate these. So again, your dog is learning how to get excited, calm down, get excited, calm down. And if you've ever taken a canine turbo training class, you might notice that our activities tend to go in this order, from something calm to something exciting to something calm to something exciting to something calm, so that our dogs are learning how to get excited and then calm down, get excited and then calm down. And so that they're leaving on a calmer note. Now, lastly, I want to discuss training with a teen, because training is such an important part of adolescence for our dogs. As I mentioned, they forget a lot of the cues they learn as puppies. So continuing to build their skills and actually returning to some of the basics can be really helpful. When I'm first training a behavior, I often will give them a cue, such as a treat lure going up over their head or a hand signal. And I make sure the dog is able to do that behavior before I put a word to it. Now, if we're shaping or capturing a behavior, we might just be rewarding the dog for offering the behavior, or little approximations towards the behavior. Now, when I have an adolescent who seems to have forgotten what the word come means, or forgotten what the word sit means, the best thing I can do is go back a step. Make it a little easier. So if they've been responding just to the verbal cue and all of a sudden they stop, I still give the verbal cue only once. But if they don't respond to it, I'll give them a hand signal. Here's a little more information for you. I want you to sit. If they respond to that, I'll reward them right away. If they don't respond to that, I'm not going to ask for sit right away. I'm going to wait for them to offer that behavior so I can capture it. Or I might even lure them a couple of times to remind them this behavior pays off. Now we're going to repair it to a word. So we're really going back to the basics if our dog needs that. Now we're also really going to be working on impulse control. I mentioned a lot of our teens are jumping up and stealing things off the counter. They're stealing your socks. They're grabbing things out of your hands like they never did when they were really little. And so teaching them how to have self-control is really important at this age. One of my favorite games is taking just a few treats in the palm of my hand, and I'll make them something relatively low value. This is just like a dog food. I'll put this in the palm of my hand, and I'll hold it really high up where the dog can't actually reach it. And every few seconds they don't try and take that from me, I'll feed them a treat from my pouch. But I want to make sure the only food in their field of vision to begin with is the food in this hand. So this hand's empty to begin with. The dog does not try and take this food. I'll say, yes. And I'm going to feed them a treat out of my pouch or pocket. I'll reward them every few seconds that they leave this food alone. And I'm going to slowly lower it closer to them. I want to make sure it's high enough up that they're not practicing trying to take it. So if I put that food right in front of their nose and they try and take it and I have to snatch it away, and they try and take it and I have to snatch it away, I'm working at such a difficulty level that the dog is practicing trying to take the food, and they're only not succeeding because I'm a little bit faster. Instead, I want them to practice not taking it. So I have my hand a little higher up with it open. They know the food is there, and I reward them for not going for it. Then I can slowly lower it down as they're successful, feeding them a treat each level until it can be right here in front of their nose. And they're looking at me because they know the best thing to do is just to wait, because they're going to get reinforced for not going for that food. That's a basic self-control game. I start with food. I play with all sorts of items. I'll take a Kleenex or a tissue or a towel, and I'll play the same game. This thing that you try and snatch out of my hand when I'm walking holding it, it starts up here. You get rewarded for not going for it, and it slowly lowers down in front of you as you're successful. I'll animate it just a little bit. Again, making sure I'm working at a level where the dog is not practicing trying to take it. If they do jump up and try and take it, I simply move it a little bit higher up and go a little bit slower, and I'll feed a little more frequently. So this can feel counterintuitive because our dog just did something we didn't want them to do. Why would I feed them more? But from the training perspective, what we want to do is split criteria. Criteria being what your dog has to do to earn a treat, and splitting meaning we make it easier. We take a smaller bit. So I'm going to feed them for a shorter period of time between looking at that and not trying to take it. So treats happen more frequently so that they can be successful. And then I can start to feed less frequently as they are succeeding in this. So that's one of my favorite games with teens. And I'll actually work on lowering those items down onto a counter. So when I can set it on the counter, I'll feed the dog for not trying to take it off the counter, and then I'll put it away before the dog practices stealing off the counter. Speaking of counters, counter surfing tends to be a huge thing in our adolescent dogs. They just discovered that they can see up on counters. They're finally tall enough that they can pop their legs up there and grab that little bit of food you left up there. So what I want to do with my teenagers and my counters is make sure, again, they don't have access to it when I'm not there. And when I'm there, I want to reinforce an alternate behavior. So for my dog, she's an adult, but she's a counter surfer. She knows that when we're in the kitchen, she's going to get lots of treats as she lays on her dog bed. So we have a little dog bed station in the kitchen. She lays down there. I'm going to give her little treats the whole time we're there. She gets them maybe every 20 minutes now, but when we first started, she was getting treats every 10 or 30 seconds just for laying on her dog bed while I was preparing food, because I knew she was actually having a lot of self-control to not steal my food. Now, the other thing I did was reward her for making good choices. So 9 times out of 10, your dog might walk by the counter and not jump up. But that one time they do jump up, we notice. And we pay attention. It gets our attention. We go over there and we talk to our dog. We tell them to get off. That attention can reinforce the behavior of jumping up on the counter. And we sometimes see dogs who do things like jump up on the counter to get their human's attention because it works. So instead, what I want to do is pay attention to my dog when they notice there's something on the counter and then choose to move away. That moment they choose to move away, I'm over there, oh, good dog, look at you, you're awesome. Do you want to go get something over here? Here, we'll go play for a little while. I'm giving attention and I'm reinforcing the good choices. I see there's something up there. I'm going to go do something else over here. That's awesome. That's what I want to see more of. Now, this can be hard with adolescents who are high energy, but the more we give them attention or reward calm behaviors that they give us, the more frequently they'll give those. So another one I really love for impulse control is just reinforcing calm behaviors. Your dog lays down, go over and give them a treat. The first time you do that, they're going to get up and they're going to follow you afterward. Hey, why'd I get that treat? Can I get another treat? What's going on over here? I'll give them a little attention. Hey, how you doing? You're a good dog. But I'm not going to feed them another treat until they go and they lay down again. That calm behavior, that's going to get a treat out of me. Good, that's what I like. There's a treat. Yeah, you're a good dog. And over time, what we see is more resting, more calm behavior from them. And so in this way, we can actually reinforce that calm. But I'm really thinking this is a long-term game, not the short term. In the short term, you will likely see them get up. Now, your adolescent is not going to have a huge attention span. They're not going to be able to focus for quite as long as an adult dog might. So I will continue to keep training sessions short. Impulse control is not an endless resource. I think of it like patience. We only have so much patience throughout the day, and our dog only has so much impulse control throughout the day. So when I'm playing games that rely on impulse control, I keep it super short for them. I don't want to push them to the point where they're making mistakes. The more successes they have, the more they're going to learn that behavior, and the better equipped they're going to be next session. So I really want to set it up so that they are having these short, successful training sessions. 5 to 10 minutes, 15 if the dog really likes to train. My dog actually is not a huge fan of training. I got her as an adult, and something about learning is aversive to her. As soon as she figures out this is a trick, she doesn't want anything to do with it. So we train really short sessions. We do 2 or 3 repetitions of something. And when she still wants to do it, I end. Then when I start a training session again, she's excited about it. She's like, cool, we're going to do that weird thing again. Because it does not last so long that she no longer wants to play. So it depends on your individual, but I look at how long does my dog like to train? And I keep it short for them. I keep it within that time, and I like to end before the dog chooses to walk away from training. And finally, as we're training, we are continuing socialization for our teenagers. So socialization does not end. This is a lifelong process. And there is a really sensitive period for it that the dogs go through when they're very young, younger than 14 weeks. But our adolescents are still learning about the world. They're still learning about people, learning about dogs. And every time we go out and we feed them a treat for seeing something scary, or feed them a treat for seeing another dog or person, or go on a buddy walk with another dog where we're at a distance and we're walking along, letting them sniff and explore, they are learning and they are developing their social skills. Adolescent dogs still don't know everything about playing with other dogs. In fact, these dogs tend to be kind of rambunctious and annoying to adult dogs. So I'm going to go ahead and actually send you a little article on teaching your puppy how to read cutoff signals in other dogs. Because your adolescent dog does not necessarily know what an adult dog means when they turn their head away. This is a cutoff signal. It means I'm done with this interaction for right now. I need a little break. But our adolescent dogs don't always hear that. For them, they're like, oh, I gotta get in front of your face now. Your face turned. It's over here now. Let me get over there. And so that can lead to some negative interactions with other animals. So as we're going, we help our adolescents interact in a polite way. But if they're doing something and we see another dog saying, no, thanks, I'm good, we can recall them out. Hey, come over here instead. Good dog. They can get rewarded for that. If we're consistent, our adolescents can actually learn that a head turn means you should probably run away, run over to mom, run over to dad, run over to whoever your person is. And good things happen then. I'm petting my dog now, so if it looks weird, it's because there's a dog right here who needs petting. So continue to socialize your dog and think about doing so at a level where they're comfortable. Our adolescents might not be as interested in big group gatherings as our young puppies were. Puppies are really open, really interested in meeting new dogs, new people. Adolescents, we're starting to close up what we like socially. Your teenage human might have a few friends, whereas your young kid might have played with everybody. So having them hang out with their good friends, building relationships with other dogs or people by doing fun things together, like going and exploring a park or doing a training exercise together, that is a really good way to keep growing their social circle or maintaining their social circle. All right, everyone. So it is almost 8 o'clock. We have just a few minutes left. So any questions you have, please feel free to post in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. I'm going to switch to the next slide, which just has a bunch of references. So if you're interested in scientific studies, here's quite a few on adolescence. A lot of this is on adolescence in humans. As I said, we can make a comparison because the brain structures are very similar, but there are some articles that are on dogs, as well as some really nice ones that are just on like facts to know about your adolescent dog. Oh yeah, leap onto the counter for a small dog. Liz, that's so true. Oh, tips to discourage mouthing or intense nipping. Great question. So as I briefly mentioned, your adolescent dog is still teething. So one of the things I really want to do is make sure there's different sort of substrates that they can chew on. So different materials, tug toys that they can chew on when I'm around, soft toys that they can chew on, harder toys they can chew on. I will also limit play with my hands. So if I have a dog who's mouthing, I'm not going to reward them for chewing on my hands. I want to make sure all the play, all the rough play is being done with a toy. So we tug on toys, we don't tug on hands. Now, if there is a specific location or time that they tend to nip more, I want to change what that means. So I lived with this adolescent dog. I lived with her from 4 months to 8 months, I think, somewhere in that range. She was wonderful, really sweet dog, very big. She was like 45, 50 pounds, but tall enough that when she jumped up and nipped me, she was nipping up here. And she did so mostly when I was in a hallway area or when I was walking through the main living room. Now, we overcame this by having kibble in our pockets. So I have dog food in my pocket. And as I go to walk through the living room, I just simply dropped a few pieces of food next to me so that as the dog came up, she found food on the ground. And so she started just walking next to me, eating little bits of dropped dog food. This was just part of her meal. We subtracted it out of breakfast in the morning and just put it in our pockets. Whenever I walked through that hallway where she tended to nip me, I would toss food for her. So she'd move out of the way, let me through the hallway, and wouldn't practice jumping up and biting. A proactive approach to nipping or mouthing is going to be the most successful. So if I know when it tends to occur, I can get ahead of it and reward a different behavior. Stairwells, going up and down stairwells tends to be another time where we see a lot of mouthing. So I might feed treats behind me. So the dog's walking behind me, eating the dog food off of the stairs. Or I might have a toy that I keep on my person at all times. So when the dog approaches, I know they're gonna mouth, I hand them a soft toy that they can chew on instead. I really want all that chewing, all that mouthing to happen on a different surface than a human body. If the dog does start to mouth, I step behind a barrier. So I'll get behind a gate or I'll go behind a doorway so they're not practicing that behavior and so that I'm not experiencing it. Okay, so here we have when she nips, when she gets excited, wondering if she has hurting blood in her, but I'm not a sheep. Oh, I love that. Yes, a lot of our dogs will nip when excited. There is a game I like to play for this. So it's called Jazz Up, Jazz Down. And you get a little bit exciting and then you reward your dog with a treat on the ground before they reach that point where they tend to nip. So there is going to be a threshold of arousal and excitement where the dog nips. That mouthing, that nipping is actually a self-soothing behavior. So they get so worked up and excited, the best way to calm down is to chew on you. We do sometimes see it with herding. They might run around and nip behind our feet or behind our legs. My dog, I don't know what training she had before she came to me, but when I ran through our yard for the first time, she ran up and just bit onto my arm and held, and then let go and smiled at me. That was the most fun thing she's ever done. So what I did was I practiced running a little bit and then dropping a treat so that the excitement predicted something good and calm on the ground. Now, another thing you can do is teach the dog how to interact with human bodies. So I like to teach a hand target. This means I teach the dog to put their nose on the hand. When I present my hand like this, it means put your nose right there. We do this by taking a tasty treat, something stinky, rub it on the palm of your hand. You can present this about 4 to 8 inches in front of your dog's nose. When they lean forward to sniff, we'll say yes as they're leaning forward. You could click if you have a clicker, but we're gonna mark that moment in time as they lean forward towards the hand and then feed them a treat. And I do repetitions of this. Hand in front of the nose, you lean forward, yes, and treat. Hand in front of the nose, yes, and treat. I'm trying to mark it as they're moving towards it, not right when they make contact, because if I mark right when they make contact, I might actually mark this movement away. I want it to be towards that I'm marking. And in this way, we can teach them, this is how you interact with human skin. You touch it, you don't bite it. So with my dog, she and I would run around the backyard and I'd put my hand out for her to touch with her nose. Now she runs up and she touches instead of running up and biting. But we want to work at an excitement level where the dog can be successful. So a little bit of excitement and then something good and calming on the ground. A little more exciting, good and calming on the ground. If they nip during the exercise, we want to bring our excitement down a little bit. I hope that helps. I love the but I'm not a sheep. Dogs got to find sheep where they can. If they can't find a real sheep, they might just choose that we are a sheep. Well, thank you so much for attending. I love these little webinars. I love seeing what questions people have. Feel free to reach out to Canine Turbo if you ever have any questions. We are here to help. We do have a YouTube channel where all our webinars go up, so you can access this one. It'll probably go up within about a week. And you can see our old webinars, our other Ask the Trainer webinars. That canine body language webinar is on there. I highly recommend it if you haven't watched it. And again, always feel free to reach out. We are here to help. Thanks for joining.